what is freedom? Freedom is this feeling of being able to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, all of that kind of jazz there. But it's not just a feeling, it's actually experiencing it. Now, I like to say it's important to have a sense of freedom as opposed to freedom itself. And so in this video, I really want to explore this whole idea of wanting freedom versus designing it. How do you actually design what freedom looks like? Now, admittedly, I'm still on this journey myself, but I believe I'm closer to others relative to some people who may be watching, etc., etc. And so this is kind of like a journey that we're both going on in terms of this video. Now, freedom isn't found, it's designed. Really important to understand. What I mean by that is you can't say, oh, one day we're going to be millionaires. One day we're going to be able to do what we want, all of this kind of jazz there with your friends, and not actually design the outcome. That's ludicrous. It doesn't even make sense. We know there's a lot of things happening right now. Regardless of what country you're in, taxes are probably higher. It's probably more expensive to buy property. There's less jobs to find. It feels like everyone's gatekeeping the opportunities out there in terms of entrepreneurship. The only things you hear is invest and property. Like, yeah, how are you designing it? How are you getting in those rooms that enable you to design your freedom? Let's talk about some of those things. And so before I continue, as always, if you want to get to a point of truly understanding whether you are ready to go independent, then make sure to check out this independent consultant readiness self-assessment that I've designed in order for you to start taking the first steps towards that. Okay? So let's keep it moving. So, context for you guys. Many professionals want autonomy. Now, before we get to those points, when I think of autonomy, I think of Daniel H. Pink's model, and I always reference this. I call it PAM, purpose, autonomy, and I think it's mastery. And so all of that is part of a framework that defines motivation, or what he calls drive, which gives us the ability to take action. So if you don't have a sense of purpose, i.e. the direction in which you're going in, that's attached to some level of meaning. If you don't have autonomy, i.e. the ability to feel like you are free enough to make the choices that you want to make, and if you don't have a certain level of mastery, i.e. have a defined practitionership level of competencies that enable you to deliver things well, then drive is very difficult to have, but you can work towards those things. And so coming back to the whole autonomy thing, people want it, but they can't clearly define what it looks like, how it works, or what it costs. And you know what? I'm not going to lie, as I'm saying this and remember sort of like voice recording these notes, what it costs is the big, people don't understand the opportunity cost of freedom. It costs something. It costs something. So it's your job to understand how much it costs. Sometimes the cost is money, okay? Sometimes the cost is time. Other times the cost is effort. This is supposed to be someone flexing their arm, okay, with muscles. Sometimes it costs one of those. It's going to cost one of those things. And so with that in mind, you need to be clear about what autonomy and freedom looks like to you and what it costs. So now we've spoken about that in a bit more detail. The next thing I want to talk about is why desire without structure creates friction. So I'm going to tell some stories here to give you some examples. I have a very good friend who is very passionate, very intelligent, and very talented in what they do. And many years back, they were in this space where they wanted to be this multi-potentialite, okay, multifaceted being. And with all the best interests, especially because this theme was rising across social media and all these different things there, in recent years, they've realized that as much as they still want those things, they can't just do things when they want to do it. The desire and hunger is there, but life has consistently told them, in other words, the market has consistently told them that they need structure, that they need to have a system, that there needs to be a certain way of doing things that are standardized. All those annoying, niggly things that we don't want to hear. For some people, the type A's or whatever, they like all of that nitty gritty detail, this, that, blah, 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 scientific mind. But for those who are expressive by nature, the thought of doing an SOP, a standard operating procedure, or writing down a tick list of what success looks like when you're filming a video makes them feel physically sick. But that's the cost I was talking about. And so now, I would say in the last year, where they were able to, I would say the year before that, not even the last year, 2 years ago, where they were able to basically start defining their systems, following a framework. They got a mentor to help them out with certain things. They had their best independent consulting year yet. Their best. And I'm talking about getting, I wouldn't say quite 6 figures, but they were definitely in the 5-figure range for sure. For sure. First starting out, that is a big win. And I'm not talking about like 10,000. I'm talking about multiples. So you need to think to yourself, what are you telling yourself to prevent yourself from creating that level of structure? Okay. Because whatever you're thinking is creating this friction that has been spoken about here. So yes, passion is good, but can be volatile. Feelings fade because they're fleeting. Structure carries you when energy drops. So whether you want to do it or not, you still have to do it because that structure is in place. What does that specifically look like in terms of structure? Let's be practical. Structure looks like booking things into your calendar. That's what it looks like. Structure looks like having a certain level of accountability, okay, when it comes to doing things. So this could be from an accountability buddy, your partner, a friend, etc., etc. Structure looks like having a framework that you follow, okay? A framework, methodology, whatever. This is basically how you do things. Structure looks like a step-by-step process. Like that's what structure looks like. Structure looks like committing to activities that are reoccurring by nature, so happen on a weekly basis, so regularly. Or it looks like knowing what one-off activities you have. Structure looks like tracking your actions. That's what it looks like against your plan. That's what structure looks like. Structure looks like reviewing things on a quarterly or weekly basis or monthly basis, whatever you decide to do, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. Obviously, annually may be a bit too long because everyone does that, but at least monthly as an example, or quarterly at the very, very least. That's what structure looks like. So how can you implement this stuff? Well, you start tackling these things. I mean, it's self-explanatory in that sense. And so I've written here, freedom without structure creates chaos, not autonomy. And we don't want chaos in our lives. We don't want chaos. And so here now, we're starting to think about how it's important to make sure that you don't just create exits, but you're thinking about outcomes. So what are outcomes? Outcomes are essentially things that you want or desire. They are desires. That's essentially what it is. They're wants. Okay. They are the end state of what you want. And so you need to be very clear about what those end states look like. So when thinking about independence, it's not necessarily about leaving something. Independence is just a new way of living. Okay. And so when we think about outcomes in relation to independence, and I'm thinking this off the dome right now, is number one, independence means making sure that you have a certain level of money. Okay. What do I mean by that? Well, if we're thinking very practically, you have maybe, let's say, for example, at least 3 to 12 months worth of money saved. Not everyone's going to be at that situation. Not everyone's going to start that way. Not everyone's going to have the same outcomes. That's perfectly fine. There's also protection and security. Okay. So what do I mean by that? What insurances do you have in place? What insurances do you have? The other thing is in terms of the work that you provide. Okay. So what value are you producing? What delivery outcomes are you producing for your clients? What is your market? These are all different things that you need to think about because that will determine, okay, what outcomes you should have, what outputs. So these are tangible things that you're producing that help you create these outcomes. And what decisions do you need to make? So define this stuff. Really important for you to do this work. The other thing I want to say is that design starts with constraints. Now, a great way to think about this, again, I'm always going to lean on the program world that I'm part of, is this whole idea of a project brief or a program brief. And essentially what a program or project brief is an opportunity for you to collate all of the different components that will determine whether a project or program is successful. In this instance, the project being the fact that you're going independent. So typically what you'll have in this brief is some sort of executive summary or background or context. You have some sort of purpose as to why you're doing this. And then you'll start writing things such as the scope. So what are the things in scope, i.e. the things that you're going to be focusing on, and what are things that are out of scope? What are the things you're not going to be focusing on? So what could be in scope in this situation? In scope is independent work. In scope is contracting. In scope is consulting. In scope is workshops and trainings for medium enterprises, as an example. What's outside of scope? 9-to-5 work, 9-to-5 employment. What's out of scope? All of those different things that you're doing before. And so once you've got the scope, you then want to think about the deliverables. So deliverables being, what are the key outputs that you want? That goes back to the section that we just spoke about. So you want to be in a situation where, number one, you developed a plan of action. So plans are deliverable. Second thing that you want to do is you want to be able to have some sort of gig work, maybe at the end of quarter one or quarter two, to explore, test your theory. Number three, maybe it's to define and refine your theory of delivery. Okay, what does delivery look like? So really defining that. Number four is actually getting paid work. Okay, maybe you want to get paid 10K for whatever it is that you're doing. And maybe those are the deliverables for now. And you can define how long you want that to be, whether it's for 6 months, for 12 months, etc., etc. And so those are your deliverables. You'll have milestones within those deliverables, i.e., what are the gatekeepers? What are the stages that determine that you move on to the next stage? Okay. And so once you have deliverables, you'll start thinking about things like, okay, what people do I need in order to support me do this very thing? Do I need a coach? Do I need a mentor? Do I need to speak to people who've been in the field before? Do I need to speak to CEOs? Who do I need to speak to? Who do I need working with me? Do I need a virtual assistant? Do I need a partner? Who do I need? And so that becomes a thing. Stakeholders as well. Who do I need to reach out to? All part of the same thing. And then we start moving into what in the business world is known as constraints. In the program world are known as risks and dependencies. Okay. And so we start thinking about RAID. What risks could happen, i.e., what are the things that could happen that could negatively impact what I'm doing? What are the assumptions that I'm making? Okay. And how do I mitigate against those assumptions? You won't have any issues at the moment because you haven't started. Okay. So we're going to leave the I part of RAID alone, but then dependencies, what dependencies could pop up at some point? And so all of these things create there are more things you can add to a brief, okay, or project initiation document. You can check it out on your generative AI or online to check out what the outline looks like. But I'm not saying you have to be that in depth, but that level of thinking is important when it comes to constraints when you're starting something like this. And then you can go out and start because you have a document that helps you understand what you need to do moving forward. It's not as big as some big 50-page strategy document. No. This is just, what do I need to get started? So this is how it works. And so we've kind of mentioned all of these things in terms of dependencies, risks, rate limiting steps, all of that kind of stuff there. So you have to design it around reality. This is not about producing something that makes you feel good and feel fuzzy. What does reality say? Look at the market, speak to the people. What have your experiences told you? So again, no delivery happens without acknowledging constraints. I'm telling you, this is why I'm such a proponent of risk. Okay. Risk management is very important. And don't sort of like misinterpret what I'm saying when it comes to risk, because even though I said risk can be negative by nature, it can also be positive. So what does that really mean? Certain risks that you take can create an opportunity. So there are those sort of risks that you can think about as well. And so really to wrap this up, what I want to say is that freedom grows where intention meets structure. Freedom grows where intention meets structure. You can't escape systemization or structure or you can't escape those things. That's the only thing that freedom can't give you. And yes, for some people it may have worked out, but for many, for the majority watching this, it doesn't work that way. You need some level of structure. I'm not saying be so over-structured that you feel like a robot. You're human by nature. But what I am saying is implement it into your spheres of influence. And so as a reminder, guys, if you're interested in seeing whether you are ready to become an independent consultant, then check out my readiness self-assessment. And that should give you some clues in terms of what you need to do next. To wrap it all up, the essence of all of this is really basically saying, don't just desire and want freedom, engineer it. That's all I'm saying. And have a way for doing it, get support for doing it if you can, or be proactive in finding the information and online personas that help you pursue this goal. If you want to see more videos centered around how you can build and create a flourishing, high-value, independent portfolio career, then make sure to like this video, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.